main feature obviously is the fact I've bobtailed it, and it's been shortened by a foot. I removed a 10-inch section from it and overlapped 2 inches, so that's your foot shorter, which basically removes all the rear overhang and makes it much better off-road. The idea behind the vehicle is basically a budget off-roader. It's had no massive amount of money spent on any aspect of it. I've tried to stay with standard parts where I can, fabricating things myself to save money and also to make them perfect for the use I intend them for. The chassis was actually in very good repair, which I think is why I decided to carry on with the project. Had the chassis been rotten as well, it wouldn't have been worth doing. It would have been far too labour intensive, and you know, it really would have been worth scrapping then. And then working around it, because at the end of the day with Land Rovers the body is bolted on, so it's not too difficult to replace sections and carry out repairs. On the rear end I've fabricated things like the rear dislocation cones, the rear trailing arms I fabricated. Fitted an aluminium panel in the recess left by the rear, where the rear window was, rear side window, because obviously that's somewhat smaller now, so the glass no longer fitted. Yeah, this is the rear of the vehicle, which stands out, I think, most of everything. Obviously it's very different to standard. We've got the Series 2 rear cross member fitted. It seemed pointless trying to fabricate something from scratch when something was readily available. And I actually picked that up off eBay for £50, so it was a bargain. And then to make it more suitable, I've strengthened the whole thing in 3mm steel plate and obviously fitted recovery eyes and the drop plate fixing. I've done the work outside my garage. It's all been done outside, which made it very interesting when it came to last October, November, and it was raining and snowing and everything else that the weather could throw at us. When I bought it, it was a blind buy off eBay, so very uneducated. I knew very little about Discoveries, and as a result it was not in the best state of repair, has to be said. Broke down 7 times on the way home from Sheffield when I picked it up. From then on I used it for a year and a half or so, just green laning, bit of off-roading, and kept it pretty much as it was. I lifted the suspension up and put the tyres on, and then just enjoyed using it until it failed the MOT quite impressively, because the body rot was so bad, all the mounts were rotten. And so from then on it came off the road and it sat there for 6 months until I had time to start working on it really. And all in all I think it took me about 6 months from starting to cutting the thing up to actually getting it back in action. So it was for such a large rebuild and doing it outside when the weather permitted, I think it was not a bad time frame to do it in. The whole suspension is completely standard. They're stock springs, yep, spaced up 2 inches on spacers, which I fabricated at work. And it's far from ideal for an off-road suspension setup. There's setups that you can spend a fortune on, and I'd never claim it was better than those, but it does the job and it does it very, very cheap. So I don't like doing a lot of work just to have a standard product at the end of the day. If I'm going to put a lot of work in, especially fabrication work, I'd rather make something that's better, more suited to the job, so there's something to show for it at the end of the day. I think it's quite nice to actually have a fairly well recycled 4x4. It goes against everything the government says about them being, unfriendly to the environment and all the rest of it, when it's probably got a lower carbon footprint than most of the cars out there. Obviously this is inside the vehicle. It's fairly standard, to be honest, yet it has quite a lot of work. With regard to fabrication, the floors needed quite a lot of fabrication on them. There's various patches here, there and everywhere. As I've fitted auxiliary equipment, things like the work light, the recovery light, I've fitted switch and relay panels along with a fuse board there. They're all waterproof panels, and obviously they're labelled up so that if a fuse blows I can see exactly what piece of equipment that's for. and I used the positions of the old heater vents because I only ever have the heater on the windscreen. It rendered the vents useless, so I took all the venting out from behind the dashboard, and it's given me some nice apertures to mount bits and bobs as and when I see fit. We've got other bits and bobs in there. We've got the CV radio, which you can see mounted into the centre console, just to keep it out of the way really. The one reluctance I had with the Bobtail was relocating the fuel tank, because obviously you lose the space for it to go under the rear boot floor, and decided that the space behind the driver's seat is actually very rarely used for anything, and it would be a perfect location for a fuel tank. Quite a custom piece of fabrication just because of the shape involved, and I worked out roughly what capacity I needed. I was aiming for 40 litres because I never ever filled the standard tank up for days off-roading. Just there was no requirement for an 80-90 litre tank. So I went for 40 litres, fits in really, really nicely. And as I say, I fabricated the whole thing out of sheet steel. I made a cardboard mock-up first, 1-to-1 scale, so that I could try that in, check it fitted right, check everything worked out where I wanted to locate the pickups, the fuel filler, all that kind of stuff. And then went from there, made it out of sheet steel.
Is it stainless?
It's not, no, it's mild steel. I figure it's full of oil the whole time, or diesel, so it's not going to rust inside, provided, you know, I don't let it fill with water. And outside it's covered in zinc primer and then coated again in satin black. Yeah, entirely new boot floor, which was just sheet steel, one large sheet cut out and welded in place, and then obviously on top of that I've got a marine grade ply flooring, which actually came out of one of the minibuses at work, which was going to be thrown away, so I saved that. And again, another large toolbox that was saved from the scrap, plenty of space in there for bits and bobs, all my recovery gear, foot pump, everything I'm likely to need off-road, safely stored in there so it doesn't rattle around off-road.